Hi, my name is Dylan,
Hey, I'm Nick.
and our project is a group is called the Spot, and we're working on a game called Tomb of the Damned. Hello, explorer. Are you ready to experience fear like never before? Prepare to explore the chilling world of Tomb of the Damned, a first-person survival horror game that throws the player into the heart of Egypt, where darkness and mystery await for discovery. Now, while exploring, there is much to uncover. However, you must be cautious because you do not know what else is out there with you while exploring. Now, our game is not an average first person survival experience. It challenges the player to fight for survival against a variety of menacing foes. However, victory isn't always guaranteed. Some enemies are unkillable, forcing the player to master the arts of stealth and strategy. Now, within our group, the significance of our game lies within its capacity to entertain and serve as a gateway to a captivating alternate reality. It offers players a unique escape from the mundane and a chance to experience the thrill of an unknown, meticulously crafted, immersive environment. Now, as you can see, this is our sequence diagram to the right. While the game appears to be basic on paper, it involves many complex networks of interactions and processes that contribute to its overall functionality and user experience. Because while some things may appear to be simple on paper, it's not as straightforward as it looks. Let's take dynamic footsteps for feature, for instance, dynamic footsteps for jumping and landing. The first thing you have to do is determine when the player jumps. Once the player jumps, in the game engine has to determine the type of surface that the player jumped on. Once it detects a surface, it can either be of two types: 3D object or terrain. That it plays the sound, but once the player lands again, we must rerun a surface detection again and then determine the type of terrain the player is standing on, because the player can in some cases jump from a terrain to a 3D object or a 3D object to terrain. So while this looks very simple on paper when I was saying it earlier, 3D sounds easy but can be very difficult to implement in real world use. Now, what we accomplished, and since we did join the class late, our first milestone, we were able to get the very basics. We have walking, running, crouching, picking up 3D objects, and being able to throw and drop objects in our environment. Now, for milestone two is where we made much more advanced progress. We were able to create a health bar, fall damage, which will lower the health bar inside in game. Dynamic footsteps. If you're walking on grass, you'll be able to hear grass. If you're walking on sand, you'll hear sand. And dynamic landing sound. So if you jump from sand to gravel, you will hear the proper jump sound for sand and the proper land sound depending on wherever you land on. The next big thing, one of the biggest updates, is a simple inventory. This will allow players to store very vital items and they find in the game world. The next thing is that what the items that we will be able to store in the inventory are called specialty items, and one of the first specialty items we have added is a health potion. The last thing we've added is a simple environment for the player to walk around it and get familiar with what they have. Nick, it's all yours.
Okay. So the tasks that we push for next quarter. So using a potion from the player inventory will heal the player. We know how to modify the health bar code and match it with the health bar UI, so that shouldn't be too difficult. We are waiting on a better inventory update in order for this update to happen. And we also need to include a game over screen. And as stated before, we know how the health bar works. So we just need to add another scene with text and buttons showing a proper game over screen. And we also need to introduce NPCs or non-player characters. And these NPCs will be interactable. They will also have a dialogue box, and one or two of them will also be able to sell armor and weapons to the player. We also need to push back things such as lighting torches and also creating a quest line for the player. And another task that we need to push for next quarter is updating the player inventory to be more user friendly. The icon inside of the inventory should correspond to the item that was picked up. And I was working on an example, as you can see in the screenshot below. and I was not able to get it to work for every item, but I was able to get it working for the sword, and I'm still working on that. Challenges faced. So the main challenge was working with the new software. We're both very new to Unity. It was also hard to follow different guides to accomplish what we wanted to do, due to differing conflicting codes and properties inside of Unity. Movement also took a few weeks to do, and there are also different ways to implement it. So we're both doing two different methods of player movement, but we ended up picking the one that makes it so object interactions are a lot easier. Dynamic footsteps is also a major challenge when trying to determine what the player was standing on. Dylan was doing this and had a hard time um, trying to see what the player is on, because you have to determine if you're on a object or if you're on terrain. And if you're on terrain, what type of terrain you are actually on. And the player inventory was something that we both overlooked, especially me. And we had to create scriptable objects, and that took a while to learn. And scriptable objects are like a data container with extra functionality. And this was used for creating different objects that are similar but function a little differently. An example is like a health potion and something like a sword or weapon, a armor piece, where they will all be kind of similar, but there will be difference in like stats, or such as in the example of a potion, it will heal the player and not give the player like a stat. And tasks to focus on for next quarter. We need to build a more in-depth and well-established environment. So things such as pyramids, forests, and lakes. And we also need to add environment sounds to immerse the player. So if the player is near like a lake, for example, they should hear running water. And we also need to implement friendly NPCs. We need to focus on creating monsters with a functioning AI. We also need to focus on a flashlight or torch so the player can see in a darker environment. The player will also need to be able to open, close things such as cabinets, closets, and doors. And the player should also be able to hide under tables, objects, to hide from monsters. And do you want to go over the contributions,
Yeah,
Dylan?
so the
Your
first
part?
thing I did was play. I created an initial player movement script, as Nick stated before. We were both working on two separate versions, but Nick's version was more superior due to its long-term better functionality with future code. So we decided to go with Nick's version. However, within Nick's version, I had to make updates sequentially with updates that I needed to have different updates, like jumping, state machines for player state, and a layer mechanic to determine if the player is on a 3D object or terrain. I also added fall damage, which lowers player health, picking up, dropping, and throwing items, terrain detectors to determine what type of terrain the player is standing on, dynamic footstep sounds depending on what the player is moving on, a basic 3D environment, and a health bar user interface. Nick?
So I did the player movement final version, and this included jumping and crouching. And Dylan later messed with the jumping mechanic and made it a little bit better. And I also added scriptable objects. So you can add objects such as health potions, weapons, armor, and those can be added to the game. And you can also differentiate between the different items that are added in the game. And these items can be picked up and added to the player inventory. There is also a basic player inventory screen that I created, and the number of different items picked up will also be displayed inside the inventory. And you can also save and load items to the player inventory. So if you type T, that will save your current inventory. So the next time you run the game, if you type L, then it will load your current inventory. And lessons learned.
Lesson
We
learned
learned
is to
to
never
not.
underestimate the difficulty of adding a new feature, because me and Nick both learned when you think a feature may be difficult or may be easy, many times it can be challenging. Another one was following different guides can lead to errors and conflicts, because what one tutorial may say, there may be another tutorial that leads to another, and sometimes trying to mix and trying to watch different tutorials for the one simple feature can cause problems. Another thing we had a huge issue with was Unity conflicts. So once we started getting into the nitty gritty of diving into Unity inspectors, we had a lot of conflicts. So in the future, we plan to learn more about how we can prevent this from happening to make an easier project flow. Now we will begin our demo. If you can observe, this is our game environment we have currently created. We have a sandy terrain that I've created. Now, one of the first thing you notice is sound. When the player's walking, you can hear the player sound. You can they're walking on sound. But if you walk over here, you can clearly hear that you can hear footsteps of them walking on gravel. Now, if you walk back on sand, now it's playing sand. But again, when you jump, you're gonna hear the sound of sand, but when you land, it will be gravel. And then if you jump again, you hear gravel again. But if I jump from gravel to sand, you hear sand. Another update.
Do I show the fall damage too?
I will demonstrate now fall damage. As you can see, we are currently at maximum health. But if I jump from, say, here, the health does decrease. Now, the next big thing that Nick added, one of the biggest updates for our game, was potions. So we are going to pick a potion up, a second potion, and for now we have this, which it's supposed to be a sword, but for transparency, it will now be represented by a potion, and now we have 2 items. Now, let's suppose we want to save this, so we hit the button T. This will save, and then if we hit pause, and then we hit replay, and then we hit L, we can clearly see the number of items that Nick has saved is 2 and 1 still. And then we can do it one more time, 2, 4, and then this. If I hit T, and I hit escape, and I go back, and I hit L, it is still there. But now, if I don't hit save, and I unpause, and then replay again, and hit L, clear, it should thing. I think I forgot to do it, but it will reset. Now,
go ahead and pick up an item right now. If you pick up an item. Yeah, so then, and if you don't click T to save it, so play it,
unpause,
and then play it back. And if you click load, you will see that last item picked up was not saved.
Oh yeah, you're right. It didn't. It didn't save.
And then now you can.
You're right. It is 4-2 still. Sorry. Thank you for correcting me. And for the last feature we're going to demonstrate is it's going to be what's it called? Picking up items. So if I hit E, we can clearly see we're holding the item. I could drop it, and then I could pick it up. I could drop it again, and then if I pick it up, I could throw the item away from the player.
So we have 2 different types of picking up objects. You can pick up an object to add to the inventory, or just pick it up to hold in your hand to throw at things such as monsters.
Yes, for future updates, once we add a monster, this will be helpful because we can pick up the item, throw it at the monster to help get away from the monster. We hope this demo was helpful. Thank you so much for watching.
Alright, thank you.